The darkness of space stretched endless and silent. Among the scattered remains of a forgotten war, broken ships floated like ghosts. Their twisted metal frames glimmered in the pale light of distant suns. For years, no living soul had crossed this place, but tonight, a lone human pilot drifted through the wreckage. Searching, his name was Captain Elias, a wanderer of the void. His small ship crept between shattered battleships and burned-out cruisers. Each wreck carried a story of fire and death. But Elias was not here for the stories. He was searching for something useful: fuel, food, or even technology to sell. As his scanner swept the field, a faint signal appeared. It was weak, almost gone, but steady enough to be real. Elias frowned. Leaning closer to the screen, the signal pulsed from deep within the wreckage. It was not a machine, not a simple beacon. It felt alive. He guided his ship toward the source, engines whispering. In the silence, the broken stars seemed to whisper around him, as if warning him to turn away. But Elias had always been curious. Curiosity had carried him far from Earth. Curiosity had also placed him in danger more times than he could count. Still, he pressed forward. The signal grew stronger. It led him to a shattered alien cruiser, its hull torn open like a wound. Inside the torn metal, a faint glow flickered. Elias activated his suit and stepped into the cold emptiness. His boots touched the silent bones of the ship. Every step echoed in his ears. The glow came from a pod wedged between collapsed beams. Its glass was cracked, its systems flickering weakly. Inside lay a figure, a woman. Her skin shimmered faintly with strange silver light. Her eyes were closed, her breath shallow. She looked more like a dream than a survivor. Elias froze, his heart pounding. He had expected salvage, not life. He checked his scanner. The pod was still alive but failing. If he left her here, she would not survive much longer. Something inside him whispered to walk away, but another voice, stronger, told him to save her. Carefully, he cleared the beams around the pod. The woman stirred faintly, lips moving without sound. Her voice, weak and broken, filled his helmet radio like a whisper carried by the stars. He could not understand her words, but he felt the weight of her fear. Elias clenched his jaw and pulled the pod free. With a grunt, he dragged it back to his ship. Once inside, the pod doors hissed open. The alien woman gasped, sucking in air as if it were her first breath. Her eyes opened, glowing, luminous, and filled with confusion. She looked at him, and for a moment, the silence between them was louder than any battle. She tried to speak, her voice trembling. Elias shook his head softly. "I don't understand," he said, but still. She reached toward him with a trembling hand. He hesitated, then took her hand. Her skin was warm, her pulse weak. For reasons he could not explain, Elias felt something stir inside him. This was no simple rescue. This was the beginning of something far greater, something written among the broken stars. He laid her gently on the medical bed. Her breathing steadied, though her body trembled with weakness. Strange markings glowed faintly across her arms, symbols like constellations. Elias studied them, wondering if they were scars, tattoos, or something more. He had seen many aliens, but never one like her. She was fragile yet powerful, broken yet alive. His ship drifted quietly among the ruins. The stars outside burned cold and distant, but inside, life had returned. Elias sat by her side, watching her breathe. Every instinct told him this discovery would change his life forever. He whispered to himself, "Who are you?" But she could not answer, not yet. The wreckage around them seemed to shiver, as if unseen eyes were watching. The stars hid secrets, and Elias had just uncovered one of them. He did not know it yet, but saving her would bring enemies, danger, and a story greater than any war that had come before. In the silence of space, a bond had begun, and it would burn brighter than the wreckage of 1,000 broken stars. The ship drifted silently through the field of broken stars. Inside, Captain Elias kept his eyes on the fragile figure he had pulled from the wreckage. She lay on the medical bed, her chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. The strange glowing patterns across her skin flickered faintly, as if alive. He had seen many strange things in his journeys, but nothing like this. Elias adjusted the small scanner above her. The machine hummed, reading her vitals, human medical. Software failed to translate half of the data. Heart rate, temperature, oxygen levels, all were unstable, but there was something deeper, hidden beyond the numbers. It felt as if she carried energy not meant for ordinary life. The woman stirred, her lips moving again. Her voice was soft, a broken song carried in a language he did not understand. Elias leaned closer, shaking his head gently. "I don't know your words," he whispered. Her glowing eyes fluttered open, confusion filling them. She looked around as if lost in a nightmare. When her gaze locked on Elias, she froze. For a moment, fear filled her face, as if she believed he was an enemy. Elias raised his hand slowly, showing peace. "It's okay, you're safe," he said softly, though he knew she could not understand. Still, his calm voice seemed to settle her. Her hand moved weakly, reaching toward him again. He let her touch his wrist, her fingers trembling like a child lost in a storm. Something in that fragile gesture struck Elias deeply. This was not just another alien. This was someone fighting to survive. Hours passed. Elias gave her water in small sips. Though she coughed at first, her strength slowly returned. Though she could not sit for long, every time he spoke, she tried to mimic his sounds. Her voice cracked, but her eyes shone with determination. It was like watching a child learn, yet her gaze carried the wisdom of ages. At one point, she whispered a word that sounded close to his name. Las. Her voice trembled. Elias blinked in surprise, nodding slowly. "Yes, Elias," he said, tapping his chest. She repeated it, softer but clearer. Something warm spread in his chest, a bridge forming between two worlds. Later, while she rested, Elias studied the strange markings again. They pulsed faintly, like constellations burning beneath her skin. When he touched one gently with a gloved finger, the lights flared brighter. A holographic shimmer flickered above her body. Images of stars, battles, and broken worlds flashed in the air. Elias pulled back quickly, his breath caught. The vision ended as soon as it began. She stirred in her sleep. As if feeling his fear, Elias sat back, realizing she carried more than life inside her. She carried secrets older than his own species. When she awoke again, her voice was stronger. She tried to form human words, broken but brave. "You saved me," she whispered. Elias froze, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I saved you," he replied, speaking slow and clear. She struggled, then said, "Name." Elias smiled faintly. "Elias." She touched her chest, her voice trembling. "Lyra," she said at last. The name lingered in the air like a soft melody. Lyra. Her voice made it sound like light through glass. Elias repeated it gently. "Lyra." Her eyes softened, and for the first time she smiled. It was weak, fragile, but it carried warmth he had not expected. In that moment, the silence of space no longer felt empty. It felt alive, filled with a bond being born. But the peace did not last. His ship's sensors beeped, warning of movement in the distance. Elias walked quickly to the cockpit, scanning the wreckage outside. On the edge of his radar, a shadow flickered. A ship, not his, not human. It was scanning the debris, moving closer, his gut twisted. Whoever they were searching for something. And Elias feared he already knew what. He hurried back to Lyra, who sat weakly but alert. Her glowing eyes widened when she saw the warning lights. Her lips moved quickly in her own language, voice urgent, though Elias could not understand. Her fear told him everything. She knew this presence, and it was not a friend. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Stay calm," he said, though his own heart raced. Her fingers gripped his wrist tightly, refusing to let go. For the first time since finding her, Elias felt the full weight of danger. The wreckage of stars was not empty after all. The silent warning from the scanners faded into the background, but the fear it created stayed heavy in the room. Elias sat near Lyra, his eyes flicking between her glowing skin and the distant shadow moving across his radar. Her breathing was still shallow, yet her gaze carried an ancient weight. She whispered broken words in her tongue, her voice urgent but soft. Though Elias could not understand, he felt her meaning like a cold wind. Danger was near, and it was not the first time she had known it. As the hours passed, Lyra grew stronger. Elias gave her food, small bites of preserved rations, and she forced herself to eat though the taste was strange to her. Her lips curled in confusion at every bite, but her spirit never gave up. Each moment reminded Elias that she was not just a survivor. She was a fighter. Still, when she slept, shadows stirred across her face, her body trembled, her hands clutching at invisible chains. She cried out in her language, words heavy with sorrow. Elias reached out carefully, his hand resting near hers, not touching, but close enough to show he was there, and slowly, her body calmed, her voice softening into silence again. The next time she woke, Elias tried something new. He took a piece of scrap metal and scratched simple symbols on it. A circle for star, a triangle for ship, a line for man. Lyra watched him with curious eyes, her head tilting slightly. Then she pointed at the circle and whispered, "Stare," her voice broken but eager. Elias smiled, nodding, "Yes, star." They spent hours like this, teaching and learning. She taught him her own words, her voice like a soft echo. Of forgotten worlds, he repeated them clumsily, making her laugh faintly for the first time. That small sound echoed brighter than any alarm. It was the laugh of someone remembering what it meant to live. But learning words was not all. Her memories returned in fragments, like shards of broken glass. She would pause suddenly, her eyes distant, her breath shaking. Then images filled the room, light and shadow bursting from her skin like holograms. Elias saw them, even though no device powered them. He saw great cities built on floating islands among the stars. He saw her people, tall and radiant, their skin carrying the same glowing constellations as hers. And then he saw war, ships burning, worlds falling, screams carried across endless space. Lyra clutched her chest, her voice breaking. "Fall. Home. Burn," she whispered, tears glowing on her cheeks. Elias reached out, steadying her. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe here." But inside, his heart twisted. This woman had survived the death of her entire world. She was not just an alien he had rescued. She was the last memory of something greater. Her eyes lifted to his, and in that silence, Elias knew she carried more pain than any human words could express. The shadows of her past were not done. When she rested again, visions came unbidden. Elias watched in quiet awe and fear as the glowing marks on her arms pulsed like signals. This time the visions were clearer. He saw her standing among warriors, their armor burning with the same silver light. He saw betrayal, a figure cloaked in darkness, leading enemies against her own people. He saw chains binding her in a pod, abandoned in the wreckage, left to drift until death. Her voice shook as she whispered a single word, one he had not heard before. "Hunters," she said, her tone filled with fear and hate. Elias's mind sharpened, the shadow on his scanner, the ship moving closer through the debris. It was not random. They were the hunters, the ones who had destroyed her world and left her for dead. And now they were searching for her again. Lyra clutched Elias's sleeve, her glowing eyes begging him to understand. She spoke broken words, each one a struggle. "They find me. Kill," she said slowly. Elias took a deep breath, nodding firmly. "Not while I'm here," he answered, his voice steady. Her hand tightened on his, and for the first time, trust burned in her eyes. Trust mixed with fear, and a bond deeper. Then survival began to form. Outside, the wreckage of stars drifted in silence. But the shadows were moving closer. Inside, two lives bound by chance began to prepare for what was coming. Lyra's past was no longer just hers, it was now Elias's. Burden too. The hunters had ended her world, but this time she would not face them alone. The ship drifted slowly through the endless sea of stars, far from any world, far from any safety inside. Elias sat across from Lyra, a small light casting a soft glow between them. Her silver-marked skin shimmered faintly, the patterns pulsing like quiet heartbeats, though her voice was still broken. Her eyes carried sharpness, a will to learn, and so the bond between them began to grow stronger. Word by word, sign by sign, Elias drew more shapes on scraps of metal, teaching her human words. "Ship," he said, pointing around them. "Ship." Lyra repeated softly, her lips trembling at the strange sound. "Man," he said, tapping his chest. "Elias man," she answered, the corner of her lips lifting slightly. Then she touched her chest and whispered, "Lyra, woman." Elias nodded, his smile faint but real. Each lesson felt like a bridge across the silence of space, but it was not only words they shared. Lyra showed him gestures, her hands moving in smooth patterns. A circle traced in the air meant star. A sweeping hand outward meant journey. Her language was not just sound, it was light, shape, and movement. Elias tried to mimic her motions, clumsy but sincere, and though she laughed softly at his mistakes, her eyes shone with warmth for the first time. She was not only remembering who she had been, she was discovering who she could become. Still, danger hung close. The hunter's shadowed ship had not yet struck, but Elias felt its presence like a storm waiting beyond the horizon. Every night, he checked his scanners, adjusting their path through the wreckage. Every day, Lyra's strength grew, though her memories still brought her pain. She told him fragments of her story in broken English. "Hunters. War. My people fall," she whispered, her hands trembling. Elias listened, his jaw tightening. He had never cared much for alien wars, but this one felt different, because it was her war, and now it was his as well. One evening, while she rested against the wall, Lyra looked at him with quiet eyes. "You save me," she said slowly. Elias shook his head. Anyone would have, but she pressed her hand to his chest, her glowing marks lighting faintly. "Not anyone," she said, her voice fragile but certain. The warmth of her touch spread through him, not just on his skin but deep inside. He realized then that trust was no longer enough. Something stronger had taken root. It was not love, not yet, but it was the seed of something powerful. Lyra began to move through the ship more confidently. She touched the panels. Curious about human design, she hummed softly to herself, her voice like starlight. Elias caught himself watching her often, not just because of the mystery she carried, but because her presence filled the silence with life. Where once his journeys had been lonely, now every breath, every word, every mistake she made in English felt like a spark. A spark against the endless void, but shadows grew longer. The hunters were not idle. One night, the scanners pulsed again, sharper this time, closer. A fleet was moving through the debris, their signals masked but not enough to escape Elias's eyes. Lyra saw the alarm flash and her body stiffened. Her glowing marks burned brighter, her voice low and shaking. "They here," she whispered. Elias clenched his fists, his heart pounding. His ship was small, fragile, and he knew they could not fight head-on. Yet he looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, and knew he would not abandon her. He began to prepare. Quietly, he rewired parts of his ship, setting traps in the system. He checked the old weapons stored in the cargo hold, though none were strong enough for a battle. Lyra watched him work, her lips pressed tight. Finally, she placed her hand on his, stopping him. Her eyes glowed with determination. "Together," she said, the word broken but powerful. Elias stared at her, then nodded slowly. "Yes, together," he answered. That night, they sat side by side, the stars drifting past the window. Lyra whispered a song in her language, soft and filled with sadness. Elias did not understand the words, but the feeling cut through him like a blade. It was the song of a world lost, of people gone, but it was also the song of someone who refused to surrender. And as her voice carried into the silence, Elias realized that he was no longer just a wanderer. He was part of something greater, a bond between worlds, a bond that the hunters would soon try to break. But for the first time, Elias felt ready to fight not only for survival, but for her. The silence of the wreckage did not last. Elias woke to the sharp pulse of his scanner, the sound like a heartbeat racing too fast. Red lines swept across the screen, shapes moving through the debris, slow and steady. They were not scavengers, not wanderers, not lost ships. They were hunters. Elias tightened his jaw, staring at the signals drawing closer. His ship was small, no match for their fleet, but he had seen enough battles to know their pattern. They were searching, sweeping every corner of the broken stars, and sooner or later they would reach him. Lyra appeared in the doorway, her silver markings glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked at the screen, her lips pressing tight. Her voice was soft but certain. "Hunters," she whispered. Elias nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. Her hands trembled, but her eyes did not waver. She stepped closer, touching the glass of the scanner. "Find me," she said, her words broken but heavy. Elias shook his head firmly. "They won't," he replied. But the lie tasted bitter in his mouth. The hunters always found what they were searching for, and this time, they were searching for her. He began to work quickly, shutting down power to non-essential systems. Lights dimmed, engines cooled, the ship becoming a shadow in the wreckage. If they were lucky, the hunters would pass without noticing. But Elias knew luck was a weak shield. The hunters did not rely on chance, they relied on precision. Lyra stood beside him, her breathing quick, her body trembling. Yet there was fire in her eyes, a fire that reminded Elias of something long forgotten. "Fight," she whispered, the word broken but clear. Elias glanced at her, frowning. "Fight? Against them?" Her markings glowed brighter, her hand rising slowly as if feeling power stir within her. "Together," she said, her voice sharp now, stronger. Elias stared, realizing she meant every word. The hunter's ship grew closer, its dark hull sliding between the wreckage like a predator through tall grass. Its light scanned the ruins, beams sweeping across shattered metal and burned husks of forgotten battles. Elias's heart pounded. He tightened his grip on the controls, waiting. One wrong move, one flicker of power, and they would be seen. For a moment, silence held. Then the hunter's beam swept across his ship. The alarm screamed. "They found U.S." Elias growled, slamming the engines online. The ship roared to life, bursting from the cover of wreckage. Lyra gripped the side rail, her eyes blazing with silver light. The hunter ship turned sharply, weapons powering. Bolts of burning energy cut through the void, slamming into metal around them. Elias twisted the ship through the ruins, dodging between broken hulls and shattered towers of ancient warships. Each blast shook the cabin, sparks flying across the panels. Lyra gasped, clutching the walls for balance, but she did not cry out. Her gaze locked on the pursuing ship, her body glowing brighter. Elias fired his small weapons, bolts of light striking uselessly against the hunter's shields. "Too strong," he muttered under his breath, but still he fought, weaving his ship through the chaos. Every move was risk, every turn a heartbeat from death. The hunters pressed closer, their weapons merciless. Suddenly, Lyra stepped forward, her hands raised. "Stop!" Elias shouted, pulling her back, but she shook her head, her voice firm. "Trust." Her markings flared, brighter than ever before. A wave of silver light burst from her palms, flooding the cabin with brilliance. Outside, the void shivered. The wreckage groaned as if the stars themselves bent. The hunter's beam flickered, their ship shuddering in confusion. For a heartbeat, Elias saw fear in their movements. Lyra collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, her body shaking. But her power had worked. The hunters faltered. Elias gritted his teeth. using the moment to dive deeper into the wreckage. He pushed the ship into a narrow gap, sliding between metal bones of a fallen cruiser. The hunters fired again, blasts tearing through the ruins, but missing. For now, they had escaped destruction. But Elias knew the truth. This was only the beginning. He turned to Lyra, who lay weakly against the wall, her eyes half closed. "You saved us," he whispered, her lips curved faintly, her voice trembling. "Together," she repeated. Elias looked at her, his chest heavy. He had saved her once, but now she had saved him. The hunters were stronger, faster, and more relentless than he had ever imagined. But he was no longer alone, and together they had a chance. Outside, the hunters regrouped, their ships circling like wolves in the dark. The hunt had begun, and it would not end until one side was destroyed. The wreckage of stars stretched endless. Around them, silent yet dangerous, Elias's ship floated deep inside a ruined cruiser. Hidden in its hollow shell, the hunters circled outside, their shadows moving like predators waiting for weakness. Every scanner warned of their presence. Every sound inside the ship felt louder than it should. Elias sat in the cockpit, his hands trembling against the controls. Behind him, Lyra rested weakly, her silver markings dim. Her power had saved them once, but the cost had drained her body. She breathed slowly, eyes half closed, but even in her weakness her spirit did not break. She lifted her head slightly, whispering, "They not stop." Elias turned, his jaw tight. "I know," he said. He stared at the shadows moving on the screen, his mind heavy with choices. He could run, risk the jump engines, and flee far away. But the hunters would not stop hunting, not until they had her, or he could stand and fight. Even if the fight seemed hopeless, every instinct told him survival meant escape. But when he looked at Lyra, broken yet strong, he felt another answer burning inside. She had been left to die among broken stars, abandoned by those who feared her, yet she had survived, and when the hunters came again, she had stood beside him. Not hiding but fighting. Elias realized then that humanity was not built only on survival. It was built on choice, and his choice was clear. He rose from the cockpit, walking toward her. Her eyes followed him, faint but searching. "We can't run forever," Elias said softly. Lyra nodded weakly. "Fight," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. Elias knelt beside her, his voice firm now. "Yes, fight, but together." He began to work quickly, his hands moving across panels. He rerouted power from life support reserves. Strengthening the weapons, he dug through the storage, pulling out old human tech, mines, decoys, traps meant for pirates. Against the hunters they were weak, but in his hands they could be dangerous. Elias was no soldier of great armies, but he was human, and humanity had always survived by turning weakness into strength. Lyra watched, her fingers twitching. She whispered words in her language, her eyes glowing faintly as she touched the panels. The ship hummed under her hands, lights flickering with strange silver energy. Elias froze, staring at her. "You're helping it," he muttered. Lyra nodded, her voice trembling. "Stars, answer me." Her markings flared brighter, and the ship's system surged with new power. Engines purred like beasts ready to run. Weapons glowed hotter, stronger, together. Human steel and alien light merged into something new. When the hunters returned, they did not find a fragile ship. They found a predator waiting in the dark. Elias slammed the engines forward, the ship bursting from the cruiser's shadow. Weapons roared, mines deployed across the path, traps lighting the void with fire. The hunters struck back, their blasts shaking every corner, but Elias weaved through the storm, his hands steady, his mind sharp. Every move was desperate, yet every strike counted. Lyra stood behind him, her body glowing brighter. She raised her hands, silver energy flowing like rivers from her skin. It wrapped around the ship, a shield of starlight burning against the hunter's fire. Each blast hit, but the light absorbed, bending, holding. Her face twisted with pain, but she did not stop. Elias shouted over the alarms, "Hold on, Lyra." And she answered, her voice fierce, "Together." For the first time, the hunters faltered. One of their ships collided with the mines, flames tearing it apart. Another was caught in the wreckage, crushed under falling steel. Elias felt a surge of victory, his heart pounding. But more still came, stronger, faster. He knew this fight was far from over, yet he no longer felt hopeless. Because humanity was not standing alone, and Lyra was not drifting alone anymore. Their eyes met across the chaos. Elias bleeding from a cut across his brow, Lyra glowing like a star reborn. In that moment, no words were needed. The choice had been made. They would fight, not just to survive, but to prove something greater, that even among broken stars, hope could burn, and hope was stronger than fear. The hunters regrouped. Surrounding them on every side, Elias tightened his grip on the controls, his voice steady. "This ends with us, Lyra," he said. She placed her glowing hand over his, her voice a whisper but unshaken. "Then, we end together, and with that, man and alien became one force. The choice of humanity was no longer survival, it was defiance, and it would echo through the wreckage of stars." The void burned with fire and shadows. Elias's small ship spun through wreckage as the hunters pressed from every side. Blasts shook the hull, sparks raining from broken panels, alarms screaming in his ears. But still he held the controls steady, refusing to give in. Beside him, Lyra stood with her hands raised, silver light pouring from her body like rivers of starlight. The hunters closed in, their voices echoing faintly through the combs. Sharp and cruel, they spoke words Elias could not understand, but Lyra's face twisted in pain as if she knew everyone. Her markings burned brighter, her eyes glowing with sorrow and rage. "They kill all," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias glanced at her, his teeth clenched. "Then we stop them," he said firmly. For a moment, fear and hope collided between them. And in that instant, Lyra realized something. She was not alone anymore. The hunters fired again, blasts slamming into the shield of silver light. Lyra gasped, her body shaking, but she refused to fall. Her memories returned in flashes, her people dying, her world burning, her voice silenced by chains. She had once believed she was nothing but the last survivor, a broken remnant of a dead race, but now, standing beside a human who fought without fear, she felt something awaken inside her. It was not just power, it was purpose. Elias pushed the ship into the heart of the wreckage, weaving between broken spires of twisted metal. The hunters followed, their ships slicing through the ruins like knives. Every blast was closer, every second more dangerous. But Elias no longer fought only to survive. He fought because Lyra's life had meaning, and because through her, he had found meaning too. Lyra's voice broke the silence, stronger than before. "No more fear," she said, her words sharp now, her English almost clear. She stepped forward, placing both hands on the glass before her. Her markings flared, brighter than stars. A wave of energy burst outward, flooding the wreckage with silver fire. The hunters' ship shook, their shields failing, their weapons flickering. For the first time, they retreated, stumbling back like predators struck with sudden pain. Elias's eyes widened, the glow reflecting across his face. "You did it," he breathed. Lyra turned her head toward him, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "No. We," she whispered. Her voice carried no weakness now, only truth. The hunters regrouped, their fleet forming into one last desperate charge. Elias knew this was the final moment. He tightened his grip on the controls, sweat dripping down his brow. Lyra stepped beside him, her hand pressing over his, her light flowing into the ship itself. For a heartbeat, man and alien, machine and starlight, became one. The ship roared forward, faster than ever before. Weapons fired, minds ignited. Silver energy wrapped every blast like fire given wings. The hunters struck back, but their weapons scattered uselessly across the shield. One by one their ships fell, torn apart by light and steel. until at last silence returned. The wreckage drifted again. But this time the hunters were gone. Elias sat back, his chest heaving. He looked at Lyra, her body trembling but her eyes alive with fierce fire. She had not only survived, she had risen. And in her rise he had found something greater than victory. He had found her. Lyra's voice was soft, almost like a song. Before, only broken stars, she said slowly. Her words clear now. Her hand touched his, warm, steady. Now, I find me, she whispered. Elias met her gaze, his voice low but strong. You're not broken, he said. Not anymore. For a long time they sat in silence. The ship drifted quietly among the remains of war. But inside, something new burned bright. Two lives once lost had found each other. And through their bond, they had discovered hope. Lyra closed her eyes, her lips curving into the smallest of smiles. Through you, I live, she whispered. Elias leaned back, the weight of her words sinking deep into his heart. Among the wreckage of stars, he had discovered her, and through him, she had discovered herself.